folks, good afternoon. I think we're live now. A very warm welcome to this songwriting session, and it's lovely to have all of you here. I assume there are some people here. I can't see anybody, so you can see me. And I must say I'm sorry that we can't all be in the same room together. I did an event last year and we were in the Stove in Dumfries, and it was really lovely to see some enthusiastic faces. It'd be great to think that some of you are back this year, having spent the year frantically writing songs based on my advice. But we'll have to make the best of what we've got, folks. And so I'm going to launch straight in. My plan for this workshop is to look at three central dichotomies or conflicts that you can find in the wonderful world of songwriting and divide up the hour by looking at those three things. And there will be a song to illustrate each one. There's not going to be loads of songs because playing into a laptop mic and camera isn't the best way to simulate a performance, but we'll see how we go. But I thought I'd start with a wee introduction just to let you know who I am, because I'm not exactly a household name. And I'm assuming if you're watching an event like this, then you have a natural interest in songwriting yourself. You may be one already, or you may be thinking this is a route that you'd like to go down. And obviously my main hope for this hour is that I will encourage you to do so and reassure you that you have permission and that you are entirely capable. My belief is that absolutely anyone can write a song. I have yet to meet a person in 10 years of teaching or in 43 years of being alive who has no musical ability or interest. If you are a strange creature who has never been moved by or inspired by or comforted by a song, then perhaps it's not for you. But I think nearly everybody has done. We all know instinctively the value of songs in our lives. Speaking personally, songwriting has been the route into the most important friendships and relationships in my life. It's really been the thing that takes the place of a journal or a diary in my life. I don't sit writing notes about what I've done and my experiences and who I'm in love with and things like that, but I do write songs. And so I have 20 odd years of experience and 20 odd years of material, which I'm not going to bore you with right now. But that's the closest thing I have to a kind of a diary that I can look back on and think about where I was at the time. The central kind of thing about songwriting is that it's not just music. So I'm not going to try and teach you any music theory to speak of this hour. And it's also not just writing. So I'm not really going to try and teach you any poetic skills or anything right now. It's a symbiosis between the two. And one of the wonderful things about songwriting is, or in my experience, it gets you the chance to hang out with people who are fantastically accomplished musicians. And some of my best friends are people who are way more talented than me, but I've had a seat at the table because I've got the material. And so if you write songs, then you kind of up level and you get to raise your game, because there are musicians who don't write, but who are really keen to augment what you've done and who are keen to work with what you've done. So it's a great route into friendships and a great route into experiences. I've played guitar and sung all around the world, actually. Not professionally, I've got to tell you. I'm not someone who's made a ton of money off it, but it's been the absolute best aspect of my life for a very long time, and I strongly advocate it. I think it said on the blurb for this that there was going to be an introduction to the music industry, and I can't claim that there is that because I don't really have much experience of it. I do have friends who have flirted with the music industry, even some who've had the odd hit. And I can't say that it's often been a magnificently positive experience in their lives. So before you even begin the journey of songwriting, it's probably worth thinking what your goals might be. And if your goal is to be an international superstar, I'm afraid I can't help you, except perhaps to caution against it, because I think it's actually quite a miserable life. It's a bit like buying a lottery ticket. It's lovely to daydream about what would happen if you won. But if you actually did win 120 million pounds or something, all the things that you like about your life now would be completely ruined and completely changed. So what is a measure of success in songwriting? Well, for me, it is saying the thing that you hoped you could say, making the point you hoped you could point, making the point you hoped you could make, sorting out the thought in your head that first inspired you to write the song. And if you manage to do that and you connect with somebody else, whether that's one other person or a room full of people or a stadium full of people, then you have succeeded, okay? So you needn't set financial limits on what you think you can do or financial goals. If you can make a living of it, then good luck to you. And don't forget to, retweet me once or twice and give me a wee leg up, that'd be helpful. But that's not the ultimate goal of this hour. It's not to turn you into a superstar. I'm sure you already are one in your own special way. Before I get into the sort of three sections of the talk, I'd like to introduce you to a very basic toolkit that any songwriter should carry with them. The first one, this was advice I got from my first songwriting chum back when I was about 17 years old. He was writing songs, I wanted to, and he said, carry a notebook. Just carry a notebook with you. If you're a bit more high tech than that, then carry a phone. Most phones have got a good voice recorder at, and just expect to have ideas. Expect to have ideas, and if you have them, expect to record them. That doesn't need to be a finished song, obviously, but just give yourself the chance to note down things before you forget them. And I guarantee as soon as you start doing that, more ideas will come. If you work in the expectation of getting inspiration, then you will get some inspiration. And the other tool that's useful, but not essential, is an instrument, of course, because there is a musical aspect of songwriting. You don't need to be an accomplished musician to write songs. Okay, my instrument of choice is the acoustic guitar, which I will play for you in a moment. And I think I wrote my first song after learning my second chord. That was with the encouragement of a good friend who was already writing songs. But you don't need to be a fantastic instrumentalist to be a songwriter. And I would remind you that we all carry an instrument around with us in our throats, in our voice boxes, okay? We can all sing. You may not think you can, but I promise you that you can. So with that the introduction, I'm going to jump into the first part of the hour, which is looking at a central conflict or a central dichotomy of songwriting, and it is words versus music, which I sort of mentioned earlier. I'm not teaching you to be a poet, and I'm not teaching you to be a demon shredder on the guitar. But the first question people always ask, and I was asked it this week to fill in a blog post for this event, is what comes first, the lyrics or the music? And I've seen the greatest songwriters in the world be asked this time and again by interviewers. And some of them are very gracious and try and answer it sensibly. And some people do have a very clear technique. For example, one of the first bands I was really keen on was Oasis, and the songwriter of Oasis, Noel Gallagher, makes no bones about the fact that he makes up the tune, the chord sequence first, and then slams some words on to fit the bill. And they don't always necessarily have to be terribly meaningful or even particularly insightful. There is a strange black magic with songs that lends meaning to things which would be meaningless otherwise. And if you have ever stood in a crowd of 50,000 people singing "So Sally Can Wait, She Knows It's Too Late" as she's walking on by at an Oasis concert, as I had the privilege to do, it has a meaning. You know, there are thousands of folk feeling it. So it's his technique works for him. And there are other folk, of course, who start with the words. I think someone like Leonard Cohen is going to be writing poetry, which he then puts to music. And there are also partnerships where one person takes one job and another takes the other. A strong example of that would be Elton John with his lyricist Bernie Taupin, I think his name is. Apologies for the datedness of my cultural references, by the way. I grew up in the 90s. I listened to music from the 60s. I haven't quite joined the 21st century yet, but these examples still stand. But on the whole, the notion that you can ask whether the lyrics come first or the music comes first shows a central misunderstanding about language. We speak a musical language, folks. English is a very musical language. All right, it's not tonal like Mandarin or something like that, but we all know the difference between saying what and saying what. There's music in everything that we say, and it's an extremely rhythmic language as well. And I'm going to illustrate that with a very trivial example, because as I was thinking about how to orchestrate this talk, I went for a long walk around the woods near where I live, and was going to tell you a little bit about one of the collaborations I've done where I write the music and the friend writes the words, just to show that that's something that can be done. And the friend who writes the words, who has been writing words, lives in Texas. And the phrase, "I have a friend in Texas," popped into my head. And instantly that was, "I have a friend in Texas." Ooh, there's a song there. Bring on the story. He lives there with his man. He sends me lots of lyrics. And he does, he sends me tons. And I do what I can. Bit of false modesty there, I'm very good actually. Although I've never met him. Further the story a wee bit. I'm sure we'd get along. Vary the melody a wee bit. For we're already brothers in the merry land of song. Now, years of self-editing tell me that's unlikely to make it onto my next album, but it's a nice wee thought that made me smile. And it's just another coin in the piggy bank there. You know, it's got rhythm, it's got rhyme. And if I ever was stuck for something to do, I could pull that one out and have a go at it. I'm going to play you a song, though, that's a completed song, which came about in quite a similar way. It was a phrase that came into my mind while I was listening to the morning news and was being depressed by it, which generally happens when I listen to the morning news these days. And I did work this one up into a finished song, which I shall play you in just a wee second. I have to take a sip of water. And this is called Here for a Minute. The three songs I'm going to play today are all quite, well, they're a bit hippie, to be perfectly honest. They're about peace and love and things like that, because I think there's too much conflict in the world at the moment. I have written lots of songs about conflict, but I'm trying to be upbeat today. So here is Here for a Minute, which was born from the first line occurring to me and me just thinking, well, that's got a wee rhythm to it. That's got a wee bit of a musicality. And your first tip, folks, is to listen out for the musicality in the conversations that you have, the things that you say and hear, and the things perhaps that we are losing at the moment of being isolated and being very much stuck to a world of text and tweets and even less expressive GIFs and emojis. Spoken word is music, and don't doubt it for a minute, okay? So practice the art of conversation and listen out for those wee nuggets. Here's a wee song for you. Here for a Minute. Nightmare on the morning news starts to bring you down. Pushed somewhere you didn't choose and pinned right to the ground. Until you suddenly see that we are totally free to be the best of ourselves. And give some love, we're only here for a minute. Give some love, we're only here for a minute. Give some love, we're only here for a minute, then we're gone. Wrong end of the telescope to see what we can find. Smaller joy and smaller hope, but we must be going blind until we finally know there's not much further to go, and we should use our time. Give some love, we're only here for a minute. Give some love, we're only here for a minute. Give some love, we're only here for a minute. Then we're gone, oh, then we're gone. Hold on, slow down. There's no need to get caught up in confusion. One life, one time. Take a glance at this path that we're choosing and give some love. We're only here for a minute. Give some love. We're only here for a minute. Give some love. We're only here for a minute. Then we're gone. Oh, then we're gone. Give some love. We're only here for a minute. Give some love. We're only here for a minute. Give some love. We're only here for a minute. Then we're gone. Gone. There you go. a wee song that was written just entirely based on the rhythm of the first line, "Nightmare on the morning news starts to bring you down," popped into the head the way thoughts always do, and I just managed to catch that one. And I'd say 90% of being a songwriter or a poet or a lot of different things is catching the ideas as they come, because they do come. We're amazing people, pictures, human beings. Right, so that's music versus lyrics. I hope I've convinced you that actually the music is in the lyrics and the lyrics are in the music. You don't need to think that you're going to be sitting down and writing a lengthy poem and then trying to work out a melody to it, or sitting at the piano or the guitar and making a fantastic chord sequence and then sticking arbitrary words to it. If you're lucky, and with practice, you're going to get them both at the same time, okay? Song is bigger than the sum of its parts. So the second section of this little chat is about another conflict that we might have as songwriters or as creatives of various times, and even just as people, and that is the personal versus the universal. Okay? I think some people are discouraged from songwriting because they feel it's a slightly egotistical thing to do, or because there's an implied performance or an implied expectation that folk are going to listen to you. There are lots of us, particularly maybe in Britain and particularly maybe in Scotland, where there's a bit of a social taboo about being a show-off, that we shouldn't really be expecting folk to do that, and it's not really our place to do this. That's not true, folks, okay? We are complex and conflicted beings. We live in our own perceptual worlds, and we take our perceptual worlds out into the wider world, which is populated and formed by the perceptual worlds of everybody else there. And we are getting driven ever more into tiny little bubbles and tiny little cliques where everyone thinks that their individuality is the only sacred flag that they can walk under. And I think that one of the most important things for me for songwriting is that it's an opportunity to relate your experience to the experience of everyone around you, or to really try and get inside somebody else's experiences. So we're living in a very peculiar time right now. Yesterday evening, there were vigils trying to reclaim the streets after yet another violent attack on a woman by a man down south. And the discussion about this online on social media, which I've been kind of observing but not joining in with, it seems to be bolstering conflict and bolstering division, and people are being told that they can't comment on this, and others be saying that they dispute the importance of this and things like that. And it just seems to me that there's an awful lot of misunderstanding and an awful lot of lack of empathy going on, and almost people being discouraged from trying to empathize with others because, well, it might be cultural appropriation, or you might be mansplaining, or you might be talking out of turn. You can't possibly know my experience. I think that as a creative person, or particularly as a songwriter, which you're all going to be by the end of this hour, you have the magical power to genuinely put yourself into somebody else's place. You have to reflect on where your experiences meet those of other people, because at some point you're going to play your song to someone else. And if you're just going to write songs about some incredibly niche pastime that you happen to be particularly fond of that no one else has experienced, it's going to be a long time before you find your audience. It is practical to be thinking about the common ground. What's the thing that's going to connect you to the people who are going to hear you, or the people that you're going to play with? And that is just good therapy. It's good for your soul and it's good for your mind. I did start writing this as the ego versus the ego-less, because there's an aspect of music which actually helps to dissolve that inner voice somewhat. If you're someone who doesn't really want to be navel-gazing too much, then I promise you that making music with other people is one of the most amazing ways to lose that barrier, to break down that barrier between the self and the other. And if you can be in a room with a group of musicians, or with an audience, in fact, for that matter, and create a sound which is very much in the moment, that's very mindful, then you can lose that nagging internal voice and become part of something that's bigger than just you. And I don't know of many other things that do that. Certainly in my experience, I guess maybe playing in a sports team at high level might be something similar, but I have no experience of that because I've got two left feet. But I think music, particularly songwriting, is one of the most incredible places to feel that you're part of a bigger whole. And I think that's a feeling that many of us are longing for right now, as we've been isolated for a long time and only interacting with very superficial communication. So the song that I'm going to play you in this section is really a plea for that idea of recognizing the universal in the personal. Recognize that your experience is not unique. I mean, obviously, on one level, it is unique, but you must recognize that somebody else will understand this. Someone will anything, whether it's a trauma or whether it's a wonderful surprise, a triumph. There's going to be a level in which this can connect you to somebody else. And also, a great font of songwriting inspiration is reaction to things that you see going on around you, reaction to current events, to personal events, making sense of those in your head, solving them with a bit of deep thought and consideration, which you maybe don't get just by writing angry tweets. But having read a lot of angry tweets, I know that a lot of people's reaction to current events is very partisan or very binary. Something is either right or wrong, and if somebody posts a thing or says something that you disagree with, then it's an opportunity to put a barrier up and imagine that this person is someone you could never agree with or could never connect with. And I think that's an absolutely tragic misconception about the nature of humanity. We're social beings, and we do understand each other, and we can empathize with each other, and we can put ourselves in each other's shoes. So last year, in the summertime, we witnessed the Black Lives Matter protests around the world following the murder of George Floyd by police officers in the States. Sorry, this is a bit of a downer, folks, but this was something that inspired the song I'm going to play you. And the protests were great, I thought. Obviously, there was some social unrest and things and people who were upset by it, but it felt to me like this genie was not going back in the bottle now, and that the world was going to have to face up to the problems with institutional racism and things. But it quickly became an opportunity for other people to just say, no, we're not having any part of this. This has nothing to do with us. Those people don't relate to us in any way. And so I wrote this song that I'm about to play you as a plea to recognize not only your I don't want to say brotherhood because it's but your connection to the victim in a crime, but also, crucially, your connection to the perpetrator in a crime. We are all one, folks, and we all have good and bad in us, and we all have the opportunity to help and to hinder our fellow folk. So this song's called That's Me, and it was inspired partly by that tragic event last year. Hope you enjoy it. That's me with my knee on his throat. That's me crying out as I choke. It's me on the streets in despair. That's me staying home like I just don't care. That's me. That's me with the fear in my eye. That's me being one of the guys. That's me with the wind in my sail. That's me marking time as I rock in jail. Either we are one or we are nothing. Either we are one or we are nothing. That's me, gun in my hand. That's me, fire in my hand. That's me lying under the heel. That's me going mad with the power I wield either we are one or we are nothing. Either we are one or we are nothing. Or either we are one or we are nothing. Either we are one or we are nothing. If my right hand should offend me, I will wash it and move on. Can never hate a stranger when I see strangers gone. We have nothing to rely on if we cast ourselves adrift. We are one or we are nothing. We are all there ever is. We are one or we are nothing. Either we are one or we are nothing. Or either we are one or we are nothing. Either we are one, we are nothing. There you go. Very strange playing that to myself in the camera there. I hope that you heard and enjoyed that. A couple of little songwriting techniques going on in there. The first one is, of course, having a repeating phrase. That's me. That was a good intro to the idea, but also the repetition within the chorus. I was hoping that would end up being slightly mantra-like. You know, when I sing that, I genuinely sing that to make myself feel better because I'm kind of worried about the state of the world today. And if you can create a little mantra, a little spell, if you like, that's worthy of repeating, then by all means repeat it. A song doesn't need to be particularly complicated. Right. For the last wee section, I'm going to look at another conflict, and this one is key. Oh, by the way, I should say at this point that if you have any questions, I'm going to hopefully have about 5-10 minutes at the end to answer them. Just type them into the chat, type them into the private chat, and the moderators, Andy and Kirsty, will let me know, and I can see them at the end. I can't see any of your chat right now, if there is any, but I will be able to see them at the end, and I'd love to field some questions for you. So if anything comes up, please let me know. The last wee section then, folks, is quite a big one. This is writing versus performance. So we haven't gone that deeply into songwriting because it's a short thing. I'll give you a couple last wee tips for songwriting for getting started. You absolutely do not need to reinvent the wheel, folks. Okay, you can pinch tunes, you can pinch chord sequences, you can do all of that. I don't know if any of you have seen in the news that occasionally there are lawsuits of one artist suing another artist because he pinched my chord sequence or he pinched my melody line. I find that a bit bizarre because you don't get authors complaining about other authors pinching their vocabulary. You know, we all speak the same language, and we all use the same notes in music. You are allowed to pinch things. Some people have very famously been magpies and helped themselves to things. Bob Dylan used old folk songs. The Beatles used things from the blues, and certainly the Rolling Stones. And again, with the old cultural references, I'm sorry about that, but with things like lots of hip hop use samples, actually taking the recorded pieces of music from other tracks and use those to great new effect. You are allowed to do that. If there's something that you really like, if there's a song that really inspires you that you'd like to try and write a song like, learn that song and see if you can tweak a few things here and there, reverse a couple of chord sequences, reverse a couple of melody lines, and you'll have your own one in no time at all. So you're allowed to do that. But songwriting as a kind of a craft is maybe a little bit of a lonely pursuit, like a lot of writing. You may end up doing it sat on the edge of your bed in your room by yourself without much interaction. Feels a wee bit like that right now, I've got to tell you. But I am hoping there are some people out there. And that's fine. That's fine. Hone your skills on your own. It's not necessarily a spectator sport as you desperately try and find the right chord to follow the last one, or desperately try and find a good rhyme for orange or whatever. But at the end point, I'm going to argue, and not everyone agrees with this, but I think that you should have in mind the notion that you are going to share this at some time. I really hope that I do get to hear from some of you at the end of this, and I'd like to know what your own experiences are if you have had a go at writing songs. I know people who write songs and never play them to anybody, and it's still something that gives them value in their lives and still something that informs how they see the world, and it's valuable for all that. But to me, if you really are interested in the process of songwriting, if you're really interested in the mechanics of it, then you can't really say that you've completed the task until you've shared it with other people, until you've shared what you've done with an audience, if you like. And that involves a whole new set of skills, performing skills, which don't come fully formed. I know that we've all been kind of kidded on into thinking that if you're not absolutely perfect from day one, then you are an object of scorn and derision. That seems to be the message from things like the X Factor and Britain's Got Talent, unfortunately, which I don't think have had a particularly positive effect on society at large. My advice, and I have to admit I'm saying this as someone who's always been a fairly confident chap without any major neuroses, is go and be terrible. Be terrible. Start out being terrible. And the same goes for the writing process. Your first few songs are going to be rubbish, probably, unless you're a super genius, which you may well be. I've been writing songs for 20 odd years, and I don't think there's anything from the first 10 years of those that I would want to play to an audience now. It's fine to write a bad song. Please don't set your sights high. Don't think you can't do this until you're going to be able to do it to the standards of your favorite recording artist. You have to start somewhere, and every terrible song is one less terrible song on the way to your next great one. That's the way I see it. You also don't need to hammer away at finishing something that's not flowing. If you've tried to write about, I don't know, let's imagine that there's been a personal event that you really wanted to write a song about, or perhaps that there's a person that you really want to send a message to that you don't feel you can say face to face, and you try writing the song and it's not coming. Don't feel you have to finish the wretched thing. Leave it alone. Wait till some slightly more fruitful inspiration comes along. Oh, and by the way, if you do want to say, if you just are struggling to say something to someone, you can't say it face to face, can I advise you try and say it face to face? Because one thing about songwriting that I can share is that however profoundly you think you've expressed your emotion, it's highly unlikely that anyone else is going to devote the time or attention required to really dig down to your most innermost feelings and meanings. And they might just think, that's a nice catchy chorus. They're not necessarily going to take the message. So just talk to the person, for goodness sake. Writing songs for them isn't necessarily going to do the trick. That's just a wee tip from years of bitter experience. So anyway, write your song. Let's say you've gone down the route. You have written your song. You're pretty pleased with it. You think it says what you wanted it to say, and you want to share it. What are you going to do, folks? Are you going to play it to your sibling, or play it to your partner, or play it to your mum or your dad or your Uncle Jim? All these things are absolutely fine. Play it to yourself as often as you can. Practice as much as you can till you're sure you know where the song is going. I've been having conversations lately with my cousin Ross, who's another songwriter who may be watching right now, about problem that we had early on and for a long time was failing to recognize that there are two parts to performance. Singing is an instrument that needs to be practiced, and whatever accompanying instrument you may have, if you have one. A cappella singing is absolutely fine. But pay attention to the different parts of your song, folks. Pay attention to the different constituents that make it what it is. Practice them in isolation. Practice singing. Practice your voice. Practice your instrumental skills if you're going to accompany yourself until you're absolutely sure that you can do it. And even then, I want you to know that getting up and doing it in front of an audience is a completely different thing from doing it on your own in your bedroom, or even playing it to your mum or your Auntie Jean. The lights are going to be odd, the acoustics are going to sound different, and there are going to be a bunch of people looking at you, all going well. And this brings me back to something I was talking about in point 2, the connection between the personal and the universal. There is a point during performance at which you're going to have to acknowledge that you are both performer and audience. You're going to be part of that group of people who are listening to what's going on and witnessing what's going on. Take a step outside of yourself and see the event for what it is. And that's a profound and wonderful moment. But as with songwriting, I've got to tell you that performing is riven with mistakes And I've made every mistake that could possibly be made, some of them repeatedly. I have broken guitar strings, I've fluffed chords, I've forgotten lines, I have gotten a frog in my throat and not been able to carry on. Everything you could possibly imagine, all to a greater or lesser degree of extreme embarrassment. But the only thing it's really done is help me avoid mistakes in the future, okay? Our society is obsessed with success and obsessed with perfection and obsessed with, I guess, professionalism and things like that. But you have to give yourself permission to do something badly before you're going to be able to do it well. So it's great to go and to perform. And I would certainly recommend also go and see as many other people performing as you possibly can. And in fact, where songwriting is concerned as well, listen to as many songs as you possibly can. You need to be a music fan. You need to be a fan of song, a student of song almost, before you are going to achieve any massively brilliant new heights. And you maybe also save yourself a bit of time and bother. You know, for example, if I was musing on how things used to be better back in the old days, or if I was happier and more energetic yesterday, hey, that's a good idea for a song. I think I'll write a song about yesterday. And then I spend time sitting playing a song or writing a song called Yesterday and bring it to the world at large. No one's going to think my song Yesterday is any good, because there is already a very good song called Yesterday, which I will not be able to trump. So being a music fan and knowing something of what's gone before is vital. But the same goes for performance. Go and see people perform. Have you enjoyed them? If you have, what was it about it that you liked? Did they make you feel at home? Did they make you feel welcome? Were they just technically brilliant? Were they dazzlingly beautiful? There's not much you can do about that if you're not, as I know from bitter experience, but you can still be personable and you can still acknowledge your audience. Recognize the event for what it is. It's a conversation. It's a happening. It's a thing that's only going to happen this once. And although you might be playing a song that you've played before, and if you get into this the way I have, it might be something you've played hundreds of times before, you will never have played it in this exact way to these exact people at this exact time. It's always going to be a brand new, alchemical, magical moment if you let it be. I spent a lot of time going to open mic nights and watching other performers bring their new material to the fore. It's a great place to try out new stuff. And often there were folk who were very far from polished, but you begin to develop a sense of kind of fraternal sympathy and support for these people, and you hope that they'll lend you the same kind of sympathy and support when you get up with your latest cracker to share with them. An audience is essential to let you know what the song actually is. Feedback from an audience is going to inform you. You cannot tell that on your own, I don't think. I mean, you can write something that you're very pleased with because it's used chords you've never used before, or it's got some particularly wonderful rhymes in there, and that's wonderful and worthwhile. But until other people have heard it and shared it and interpreted it, and you've given it away to some extent, it hasn't completed its journey into the world, I don't think. There's always the opportunity for audience participation too, and the song I'm going to play for this section is one which usually I would hope the audience would sing along with. Now, I don't seriously expect you to sit there on your own wherever you may be right now, in your bedroom or on a train or wherever in the clergy, and sing along with me, but you could if you wanted to. And if you don't want to, then do it out loud because you're worried someone might hear you. You can sing along in your head when I come to it. And that's a lovely thing, folks. It'd be really nice to imagine that we were all joined together and having a wee song. So I'm going to sing you that song right now. I know we've got a bit of time left to go, but I'm going to sing you this one, which is called Hope. And at the end, there's a kind of another repeating mantra, which is, again, I've got to admit, self-therapy for me. I do have hope, folks, and this song is about that. And I hope that you all feel hope too. You might be tired of my slightly cheesy aphorisms and upbeat lyrics. I guarantee you've got plenty of dark, miserable ones too, but I thought I'd save them for another occasion. Anyway, here's a song for you, and it's called Hope. And if you'd like to sing along at the end, who's to stop you? Just join in, sing away. We'll see how we go. Just tune up. So I chose this one because it is one, I don't have many audience participation songs, but this is one where I do like people to join in. And when they have in the past, it's been very, very lovely. You know, it's no coincidence that most organized religions around the world have an aspect of communal singing. Singing together is a profound and fairly basic human need, I think. So here we go. This is Hope, and I hope you enjoy it, whether you sing along or not. A rolling breeze shakes the golden tree, and the golden bee disappears. The sun will rise over eastern skies, chase away the lies, the hate and fear. I got hope. I got hope. I got hope. I got hope. But we can scream and shout what we care about, but the good will out, it always can. And the day draws near when our eyes grow clear. What we're doing here, we can understand. I've got hope. I've got hope. I've got hope. I've got hope. We remember each other, and that we travel together. There's no need to feel alone or undone. I've got hope. I've got hope. This is the bit you can sing along with. Hope. I've got hope. I've got hope. I got hope. I got hope. I got hope. While our hearts are strong, I got hope. I got hope. I got hope. If you sing along, I got hope. I got hope. I got hope. Watch the children rise. Got hope. I got hope. I got hope. Right before my eyes, I got hope. I got hope. I got hope. I've got hope. I've got. Thank you if you joined in. Thank you if you didn't join in, just listen. Thank you, just thank you. Right, that was one that I like to do with an audience, so it's a little peculiar doing it without one, or without one that I can see anyway. And that end point, that end part there can go on for twice as long or not at all, depending on the people's expectations. There is one last important point to make about performing, folks, and it is that if you're slightly nervous about your material, if you haven't really quite nailed the songwriting aspect yet, but you're still keen to hone your songwriting skills, then the single best tip that I can give you, and one I wish I had been given as a young songwriter or performer, is learn the songs that you like. Okay, whatever it is that moves you, it doesn't matter what kind of music you love. You might love Norwegian death metal, or you might love Bulgarian folk music, or you might love blues or jazz or anything. Find a song that's moved you and try and learn it. Obviously, the first thing to do is learn to sing it, because that's the thing that we've all got. We've all got voices. If you're an instrumentalist too, then try and learn to play it and really hone that. And if you take that to an audience, it takes away that kind of nervousness of exposing too much of yourself with your lyrics if you're not too sure about them, or the worry that maybe your work isn't quite ready to stand up next to the greats, which, by the way, never worry about that. All the greats started somewhere. But learn as many songs as you can, sing them in as many ways as you can, feel like you're inhabiting the song, and recognize that you are still giving something to an audience if you're performing. The art of performance is a particularly spectacular thing if you can nail it. And if you do a song that the people that you're singing to know already, then of course there's a hurdle you don't need to get over. They're not going to be listening out for words and a thing they've never heard before. It's something familiar that they can join in with, that they've got their own association with, but you can still bring something new to it. So that would be, as well as listening to as many songs as possible, I would advocate learning as many songs as possible. You'll find your pitch of your voice, of where you want to put your own music and things like that. It's got so many advantages, and it is a great route into that terrifying thing of facing an audience, which, by the way, is not really that terrifying at all. It's fine. And that's really the kind of the structure of what I wanted to say to you today. I think I've covered most things. So what I'd love to do now is, if there are any questions, or if there was anything in the private chat. Aha, here we go. Right, so Kirsty says, do you have any tips for people who want to start performing their music in front of an audience? The answer is yes. Go and perform in front of an audience. I think start the open mic nights are great. Oh gosh, folks, isn't it terrible? It won't be wonderful when we go out things like open mic nights and concerts again. I'm missing it so badly. But if you can find an open mic slot near you, and that's an opportunity for people, anyone, to go up and perform. And you'll sometimes find restaurants or cafes have them. The Stove in Dumfries is an outstanding one. The Brave New Words event that they do regularly in normal times is a welcoming and wonderful place to showcase new material. And please just don't be feared. Don't be worried about doing it. You have every right. This is a thing that humans do, okay? It might seem a completely alien and weird thing for you to try, but try it. The only thing that you will regret in later life is the things you haven't tried, they say, which is true up to a point. But really do just go and give it a go. Sometimes it's painful, and sometimes it's scary. And I've certainly played with shaky hands, and a dry throat and the fear. But you get past it, and it makes you better. Okay, so please do it. Give it a try. Play to your friends, play to your folks, but go out and play to strangers too. That's the thing to really do. And you might find that the strangers become friends quicker than you expected. Right, we've got another question here. What are the best local open mic nights? There are, well, the Stove one that I mentioned in Dumfries is outstanding. I'm guessing that many of the people watching, if there are many folk watching, are from Dumfries and Galloway. So I'll talk about that. Here in Gatehouse, where I live, the Masonic Arms, the pub in the town, has a session on a Thursday night, which is kind of a jam session. So you can go in and play songs that you know, but it's also an opportunity to air new material. And that's been really useful for my songwriting. Knowing that you've got a place to go and play a song is a huge drive to get a song finished. That's another good reason for getting out and performing. So that's a good one. I'm not an expert in where they all are. I think there's some good stuff in Newton Stewart, thanks to people like Nathan Jones. And there used to be one in Auchencairn, but I don't think that's on anymore. But you need to just check it out. You need to find out. There'll be local listings that you can look at, and you'll be surprised. Festivals often have an open slot as well. Things like the Eden Festival, there's sometimes an open stage slot that you can book into. So be ambitious and just go for it. Okay. The next question that's up says, how do you come up with new and interesting chord progressions? And that's a really good question. And the first answer is you didn't have to. Okay, you don't have to come up with new and interesting chord progressions. But this is one point where I would advocate learning a wee bit of music theory. Okay, there are some chord sequences that work together, and we've known about them for centuries. It would be ridiculous not to try and take advantage of that knowledge. So, a very, very basic bit of musical knowledge is you need to know what key you're playing in, or it's useful to know what key you're playing in. So let's say you're playing in the key of C, for example. There are some chords. This is a C chord, starts in the note C. Some chords that will always work with C, okay, because they work in the scale of C. So the scale of C is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, do. Any chord on any of those notes is going to work well. So you've got your C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, and B flat, C. There you go. So if you know the correct chord sequence, if you know what's correct, then you can make them new and interesting by deliberately doing things which don't seem to fit. So plitter about. I would recommend getting to know an instrument, folks. It's good fun. Just learning, on a guitar particularly, what's happening up and down the fret, what notes, how it sounds when you play it softly, and how it sounds when you play it hard, and so on and so forth. But your chord progressions, folks, because your voice is the primary instrument in singing, get to know what your range is. There are plenty of successful artists who have got quite limited ranges. I mentioned Leonard Cohen earlier, someone like Johnny Cash. There are people who have got just a nice timbre to their voice, but they can't sing 15 octaves. And you don't need to be a spectacular singer in order to share your work. So find what's comfortable for you. Find the chords that fit that, which you'll be able to do by finding the notes. If you can get yourself to a piano keyboard or a glockenspiel or something with notes, sing your song to yourself, find what the notes are, and you can find out the chords from there. That's one way to do it. The next question is, where did I first perform? I first performed in a pub in Aberdeen called the Malt Mill. I'm from Aberdeen. I was in a band as a teenager called the Beaker People with my cousin and my friend Ian, and we got a gig at the Malt Mill, having spent a few weeks writing songs ridiculously prolifically. We just all got the bug of writing songs, and our first gig was a 2-hour gig. So I don't recommend that. I recommend going to an open mic and doing a song or two and see how that feels. But we went in and we played 2 hours, which I'm still quite proud of. I don't think it was magnificently virtuosic or anything like that, but we did it. And then the following month, we were asked back and we did another 2 hours. And I think we only repeated maybe about 5 songs. So that was where we started out. We had a sympathetic audience the first time and had a great time. We had a very unsympathetic audience the second time and had a lousy time. But all three of us have carried on with music and enjoying the opportunity to play. So, jump in at the deep end or jump in at the shallow end, whatever you do, just jump in is my advice. Here's a good one. Are there any simple techniques people can learn for calming your nerves, breathing, mindfulness, etc.? Anything you can recommend? That is an absolutely excellent question. And yes, definitely breathing deeply is a great idea. I must confess, folks, I had a wee mug of chamomile tea before I came on here because I wasn't sure how I was going to feel talking to a camera. So something like that can be helpful. I would probably discourage you from thinking that alcohol or other drugs are going to be your friend, because I'm not sure how young the audience I'm talking to are. Hopefully many of you haven't gone down this path. Some of you may have had a pint or two. It's often likely to affect your performance. So one thing that I would recommend is don't try and get rid of all your nerves, because your nerves are there for a reason. They're there because it's important that you do this thing quite well. And you can acknowledge the situation. Don't pretend you're not nervous if you are. And a really good tip, by the way, for breaking down barriers with audiences, if you're feeling nervous, don't be afraid to say so. I've come across very few audiences who are going to say, "Oh, well, you've got no business being on the stage if you're nervous. Who does she think she is, getting on the stage feeling all nervous and that?" Most people will feel empathetic towards you and will be sympathetic, and you'll soon warm up. But I do certainly recommend breathing exercises and mindfulness, and recognize the fact, folks, whatever it is you're doing, it's going to be over soon anyway, and then you can reflect on it afterwards. It's not the end of the world if it's not the best thing that anyone's ever seen or that you've ever done. It's absolutely fine to get the odd bit wrong. Just don't be hard on yourself, would be my biggest piece of advice, I think. Okay, I hope that answered that question to some extent. Avoid the booze. And the next question is, how do you go about recording your music? Okay, well, this could be a whole separate workshop. I have been doing quite a lot of home recording during lockdown, mainly because I can't go out and play. So I thought this was a skill set I should try and develop. And the software I use is called Ableton Live 10, and it's what's called a DAW, which DAW, I think it stands for Digital Audio Worktop or something like that. And there are various ones that you can get. There's a free one called Audacity, which you can just download free, and it will be that's a good introduction to starting off. And they all look more or less the same and have similar features. What they tend to allow you to do is to record directly into your computer, either through your computer's mic or a plug-in mic, or if you're getting a bit fancy, you can get something like a preamp that you can plug in, and you can play one part and then go back and multi-track, so you can sing over yourself playing. So you don't need to learn how to play and sing at the same time. You can develop your arrangements as you go. And I have been absolutely loving that just lately. It's been the best sort of route of expressing music that I can think of when you can't go out and sing with your friends. But it's a big deal. There's a lot to learn. The program I have, Ableton, that I mentioned, has got absolutely thousands of resources on it. And I'm not the most technically minded guy, so I've really had to resort to a lot of guidance. I've been lucky that friends have already used it and know how to use it. And there's also just a ton of stuff on YouTube, tons of advice. Some good channels you could check out are Musician on a Mission. If you're particularly interested in guitar, then there's a Dutch chap called Paul David, who I love to watch. He's got great techniques, not just for playing, but for recording as well. And just do your own hunts and searches. There's Produce Like a Pro, which is, I'm not sure what the name of the guy who does that one is, but he has produced people like Peter Gabriel and big name bands from the 80s and 90s, and he knows what he's talking about. And it's a good way to experiment as well, because it gives you the opportunity to arrange and to think about different sort of bandwidths. If you're a limited singer, for example, and you're mostly singing around 4 or 5 notes, but you want your music to sound a bit fuller, then you're going to learn which instruments sound good high up and which ones are low down and things like that. And it's a great way to improve your musical skills. So I do recommend it if you have the opportunity. Go free first of all. Try Audacity. It's free. And if you're old school and you can get something like a 4-track recorder where you just plug directly into a tape machine or like a computer chip, then that's nice too. And that seems to be the last of the questions, and I think our time is just about up. And I really hope, folks, that you feel that some of your questions have been answered, but primarily I hope you feel like songwriting is a thing that absolutely anyone can do. You have permission. You should be doing it. It's an amazing way to sort out your relationship with other people, with the world at large, and with yourself. And you end up with something that you've made. It's as satisfying as building a wall or making a fantastically beautiful meal or something. I really recommend it. I'd love to hear how you get on. I'm not sure how we could arrange that. But in the meantime, thank you very much indeed for joining me this hour, and the very best of luck. Go write a song. Thank you, folks. I hope to see you in the real world.